I still remember the day I met Edward. He walked into my office with a firm handshake and a confident smile, every bit the charismatic businessman he was reputed to be. I'd heard good things about him. He had a solid reputation in the industry, and his business expertise was exactly what my company needed. My partners had been enthusiastic about bringing him on board, and after that initial meeting, I felt a sense of optimism about what we could accomplish together. Edward and I quickly established a rhythm. We spent hours working side by side, and I genuinely enjoyed his company. I even thought of him as a friend, someone I could trust and rely on, someone who shared my drive and vision. We started inviting him over for dinners, and my wife, Emma, always went out of her way to make him feel welcome. She'd cook his favorite meals, and the three of us would spend long evenings laughing and talking about everything from business to travel. In those early days, I felt like life couldn't get any better. Then, one evening after dinner, I noticed a shift in Emma's demeanor. Edward had just left, and she looked distracted, almost distant. I brushed it off at first, thinking she was just tired, but the pattern continued. She seemed anxious whenever he was around, her laughter forced and her smiles strained. I wanted to ask her about it, but a part of me didn't want to intrude. I trusted her, after all, and figured it was just my imagination. One day, while organizing some old documents in my study, I came across an old calendar of Emma's. I'm not sure what drew my attention to it, but there was a date circled in red from about a year ago. Conference in Chicago, it read. I remembered that trip. It had been one of those last-minute work events Emma had to attend. At the time, I hadn't thought much of it. Business trips were a part of her career. But something nagged at me. I wasn't usually one to doubt her, but I couldn't shake the feeling. My mind began connecting dots that had never existed before, replaying moments I hadn't questioned until now, the subtle unease, the quiet looks she'd exchanged with Edward when she thought I wasn't watching. It was unsettling, like the pieces of a puzzle were suddenly falling into place, and I didn't like the picture they were forming. That night I sat her down, and I could tell she sensed something was different. There was a hesitation in her eyes, an almost panicked look I'd never seen before. "Emma," I said as gently as I could, "I need you to be honest with me. Was there something that happened between you and Edward?" For a moment, she looked like she might deny it, but then I saw her face crumple, and she whispered, "It was a mistake, James. It happened only once. We were both at the conference, and I don't know what came over me." Her voice was thick with regret, and she looked like she wanted to disappear. My heart felt like it was being wrenched from my chest. I wanted to yell, to demand why, but instead, I just sat there in stunned silence. Betrayal has a strange way of numbing you, dulling every part of you until you're not sure what's real. I could barely process her words, let alone think about the implications. This man, who I had welcomed into my life, who I had come to respect and trust, had shared a moment with my wife. It felt like everything I thought I knew was slipping through my fingers. After what felt like an eternity, Emma spoke again. "I never wanted to hurt you. I've felt guilty every single day since, but I didn't know how to tell you. And then, when he showed up here, in our lives, I didn't know what to do." In the days that followed, I grappled with a whirlwind of emotions. I couldn't look at Edward the same way, though I didn't confront him. We kept working together, each interaction now laced with a bitter irony that I couldn't shake. My respect for him was gone, replaced by a guarded hostility I had to mask every time we were in the same room. I'd built a business with him, depended on him, but now all I could see was the man who had betrayed me in one of the most personal ways possible. Emma and I began the painful process of rebuilding our relationship. There were nights when I couldn't bear to be near her, the memory of her confession still raw. Yet, despite everything, I knew I wanted to try. Love, I'd come to realize, wasn't just about the good times. It was about navigating the storms, even the ones that seemed impossible. Forgiving wasn't easy, but I knew that if I couldn't at least try, this wound would never heal. I kept Edward at arm's length from that point on. The professional partnership continued, but it was never the same. There were days when I considered ending the business relationship altogether, but practicality kept me from doing so. We needed each other to reach our shared goals, but I knew the trust was gone. Over time, I found a strange kind of acceptance, not forgiveness necessarily, but an understanding that life is messy, that people make mistakes. Emma and I continued to work on our marriage, and though things would never be exactly as they were, we managed to rebuild something that felt real and lasting. I had come to terms with the fact that our love had endured a dark chapter, but we had survived. Looking back, I've often wondered how I could have handled it differently, if there was something I could have done to prevent the pain we both went through. But maybe that's the nature of betrayal. It blindsides you, tests you in ways you never imagined, and leaves scars that may fade but never entirely disappear. To anyone who might find themselves in a similar situation, my advice would be this: take time to think before you react. Betrayal cuts deep, but sometimes walking away isn't the answer. Work through the pain, communicate openly, and allow yourself to feel. Forgiveness isn't a single act, it's a process, one that requires patience, understanding, and resilience. How would you handle it if you discovered such a betrayal in your relationship? Could you find it in yourself to forgive, or would you choose to walk away? I'm curious to hear others' thoughts on a situation as complicated as this.